Hi everyone, I'm here to do my entry into a vinyl tag for 2018 that's been floating around. 20 questions and 20 things to talk about or to show. So I'm going to get right into it because it's going to be a pretty potentially long video. Okay, the first question is, what was the first channel that you watched in the vinyl community? And I'm not 100% sure, but this would be back in 2011, maybe into 2012 early. And one of the first I remember no longer makes regular videos. His name is Gary. His screen name is SunDodger1. I remember he influenced me a lot. He's one of the first ones I really remember watching and really getting into because he showed a lot of Beatles stuff, and I like the Beatles. And I also remember watching Mr. Hall of Fame, Brandon. So those are the two earliest I remember, but there were a lot of others. Number two is, what is the favorite record that you discovered through a vinyl community video? It was hard to really come up with one. I'm pretty sure that there have been records, but sometimes you can't come up with these things in a pinch when you want to think of it fast. And then I started to remember when the new Monkees album came out, this one here, Good Times, which I have here on CD, but I also wound up getting on vinyl later. This one was being talked about in a lot of VC videos. A lot of people were really raving about this as a good album. I remember Psycho's Platters was one of the people, and some others. And I said, this sounds like a really good album. I'm going to go out and get it. I probably would have invested in it anyway, blindly, but this really sold me on it. And it's a good 2016 Monkees album. Okay, so that was number two. Number three, what are your other hobbies? Well, as I always say, I'm a movie fan and collector. So I watch and collect movies, and here's just a few. Like, for example, Marty or Ernest Borgnine. You know, that's kind of a drama. Here's The Odd Couple with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. And my all-time favorite genre is horror and science fiction. And in particular, the early horror movies like the old Universal monster classics like Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman. So that's my other real hobby that I have, and collectibles that I do. Okay, number four, why did I start to collect? I started to collect basically, it's funny, I tell this story now and then. There was somebody here on YouTube who makes videos. He no longer makes videos, but his old videos are here. His name is, or was, WABC77. And he showed a lot of records. All he did was play 45s, really, and just to do needle drops, and you see the 45 spinning. And all of a sudden, I hadn't collected records, hadn't been into records in 25 years. And after watching some of his videos, just of him playing records and seeing the needle go along the grooves and hearing the warm sound, I said, you know something, all of a sudden I'm hooked onto vinyl again. And then in late 2011 I got back into vinyl, and by 2012 I was making my vinyl community videos here on YouTube. Okay, number five, do you play an instrument, or are you in a band? No, I don't play an instrument, and no, I've never been, nor am I now in a band. So, number six, have I ever worked in a record store? It's funny, actually, I guess you could say yes. It goes way back to 1985. I think I worked for one day. I think I was there one day, maybe two, but I'm pretty sure it was one. It's a whole complicated issue why I wound up just quitting, but I was there for a day. And I just remember that, if anybody cares, I remember that there was a freedom where you could play records. You know, we could put an album on. And I remember I was the new guy. I didn't know what to play. I actually wound up putting a needle onto Bruce Springsteen's song, 10th Avenue Freeze Out. It was the one I played the one day I worked, of all things. I was trying to be kind of a little more up or with it, you know, whatever you want to call it. So I'm not even a Springsteen fan, but I like that song. Okay, so that was that. Number seven, what's the favorite album of mine from the year that I was born? Well, that would be the year 1962. And I don't really have a great favorite album, but I was looking up all kinds of albums for that year just to make sure, and I had a few possibilities. One of them could have been Bob Dylan's debut album, but although I like Dylan, I don't like that album much. Number 2 could have been Surfin' Safari by the Beach Boys. I looked up the contents. I just recently acquired that on vinyl. I have yet to play it. So, although I know a couple of songs on it, some of the popular ones, I can't really use that yet. Can't really decide. Number 3 was Meet the Supremes. Now, I love Diana Ross and the Supremes. And I have the first album, Meet the Supremes. However, I don't know if that's among their best material in that album. So, I went with Elvis Presley out of all these choices from 1962. And I went with the Potluck album. So, at least I get Elvis into this. This is my 1962 album. Okay. All right. Number 8, what classic record have I never heard? You know, well, I can tell you there are a lot of classic records that I've never heard. My mind was running rampant with all kinds of records that are great classic records by classic artists, rock bands, whatever, that I've never heard. And the one that stuck in my mind the most, that was the biggest omission, I guess, could be the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street. Everybody tells me, you got to listen to Exile on Main Street. You got to hear that. I've never heard Exile on Main Street. However, I know somebody who knows me pretty well and says he doesn't think I'll like it. But you never know. That's it. Exile on Main Street by the Stones. Number 9, show a guilty pleasure record that you have. Now, you know, a lot of people, including myself, don't really like the term guilty pleasure, you know, meaning we don't feel guilty just because we like these records or play these records or own these records. However, I think what is meant by that is you feel it's a little embarrassing, a little silly. I decided to go with this, the Brady Bunch, Meet the Brady Bunch to be exact. What can I tell you, folks? I grew up on the Brady Bunch TV show, and this record has some songs on here that bring back memories, to tell you the truth. So, everybody remember Time to Change? Or when Peter Brady sings Time to Change? Anybody remember that? We can make the world a whole lot brighter. We can make the load a little lighter. At least I think those are the words. Okay, number 10. What's the strangest record you have? Now, there are a lot of strange records I have. I really couldn't think of the strangest. To be honest with you, as I was doing the preparation for this and going through some records, this is one that hit me, and I thought, I'll use this one. It's Soupy Sales says, Do the Mouse. There's Soupy Sales doing his famous mouse dance and characterization that he does here on the back. And I was very, very small when Soupy Sales had his TV show on TV, and I barely remember the show. He used to tell kids to go into their mommy and daddy's wallets and pick out the green pieces of paper and send them to Soupy. And I think he got in trouble for doing that or something. They got crazy songs on here like Your Brains Will Fall Out, Sad Sack, you know, and Do the Mouse, of course, and, you know, Mr. Cab Driver and silly songs. So I went with that. Strangest record. Probably got a lot of stranger records in my collection than that. All right. Now, number 11. Show a picture disc. I have a lot of picture discs, and there's many I could show. And I think I might have shown this one last time I had to show a picture disc somewhere. Not really sure. But anyway, I went to this one, John Lennon. Listen to this picture record. And on the other side, you have Listen to this B-side. That was a takeoff on his advertising design campaign for the 1974 Walls and Bridges album. That's, everything was listen to this, listen to that. So that's what that's from. Okay, number 12. What is the best, I never could say this word, posthumous release after someone has died? What's the best posthumous release? I decided to go with George Harrison's Brainwashed. A lot of people probably thought I was going to go with John Lennon's Milk and Honey. No, those tracks weren't as finished to me as this. So I think this is a fine George Harrison album, and some good stuff on here. So I went with Brainwashed. Number 13. What artist do you impulsively collect? And I guess I have three, meaning like I can't help impulsively or compulsively, you know, whatever, buying these three. These are three artists that I collect. I have an impulse and I buy so many things. Of course, number one is the Beatles, and that also includes John, Paul, George, and Ringo as solo artists. So it's not just the Beatles as a group. And of course, we have Elvis Presley. I tend to buy unusual Elvis Presley stuff. And the last one would probably be Joan Jett. So those are my three artists that I collect, you know, impulsively, compulsively, different things. Okay, number 14. What's the best blind buy that I've made? There are a few blind buys I'm sure are best, but I have an all-purpose one that I use all the time. Some of you who watch my videos with regularity are going to know probably what I'm going to come up with here. It happens to be Elle King, the album Love Stuff, which I knew the song X's and O's. That's the only song I'd heard. I thought it was a good, catchy pop song, and I said, yeah, I don't like newer artists and newer music much, but let me try this. Let me go for it and buy it. And I loved this album. Almost every song on here I thought was a winner. It was a great blind buy. Although I don't know if you consider it 100% blind, because I did know one of the hit songs on it, but I was not sorry. I also have the vinyl album, the LP, 12-inch of this, but it's hard to dig it out over there. I couldn't really find it, so I went with the CD. Now, number 15, a blind spot artist. And I wasn't sure what that meant, a blind spot artist. I thought maybe it means like an artist that you really, again, didn't really think of before, and you kind of like gave him a shot or something, and you end up liking. Anyway, I have two. One of them is Johnny Cash. A few years ago, I'd always known of Johnny Cash. I knew a couple of songs, you know, I Walk the Line and so forth, but I Ring of Fire and everything. And I said, let me try some Johnny Cash. And I loved most of what I've heard. I like Johnny Cash a lot. It's a person who I kind of did more or less blind. And I don't regret it. And I'm happy to be a Johnny Cash fan. Another one, which of course is very recent. A lot of you will know this. Cliff Richard. Cliff Richard. But along with Cliff Richard, also goes his backup band that, you know, eventually did their own thing, The Shadows. And I got my fingers over it, but The Shadows, there you go. And I think The Shadows are great. I think Cliff Richard is great. He's the British Elvis. I heard the name Cliff Richard forever. I heard the name The Shadows forever, but I was blind to them. Didn't really want to know or care until 2017. Last year, and I wound up really loving the stuff. So, okay, now we got number 16, which would be favorite album cover. Well, I mean, I got dozens and dozens of favorite album covers, but I thought because the Beatles are my favorite band, I would stick to the Beatles. And believe it or not, it's hard to pick even a favorite Beatles album cover. And now that I'm going to show this, what I'm thinking, no, there's other covers I like even better than this. But I went with this. It's the U.S. version of A Hard Day's Night. I just love the red border around this, the bright red. I like the real vintage look from the 60s. It looks like a 60s album. And I love the images from the film and the black and white haircuts, the classic, iconic pudding basin mop top haircuts that are now classic. So I mean, I think that's really a great idea for an album cover. There's probably album covers I like even better than that, but that always comes to mind as one of the all-time favorites. Now, name a musician that you've met. I've met a few musicians, but the one that I always like to show is in 1985. Well, I met this musician in 1984, 85, 86. I think in 87, a few times, but this is one of them, the time when I got a photo with her. That's Joan Jett again. Joan Jett, as in Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. It's me and Joan from after a gig in 1985 where I got backstage. So there it is. That's my preferred picture or celebrity musician I've met. Okay, now it's number 18, show a record with sentimental value. Now this is very sentimental to me because my deceased friend Mike, who I always mention so often, I was very close with and who I miss dearly, he bought me this. That's why it's sentimental. Back in 1979, when this was first released, it's Paul McCartney's 45 in the picture sleeve of Wonderful Christmas Time. Mike was coming over to my house. We were just a couple of teenagers, and this was Paul's new song for the holidays. We got together around Christmas time in '79, and he was going to spend the night at my folks' house, and we're going to have a great weekend together. And he bought me this as a Christmas gift. Paul's brand new song, which now is, of course, a Christmas favorite and what do you call it? Staple of the holidays every year. A lot of people don't like the song, but I like it. And anyway, that's the sentimental memory that I have of that one. Now, number 19. What's my favorite album that no one else seems to know about? Well, this is not on vinyl yet. I'm really hoping this gets a vinyl release. And I show this a lot, different purposes. It's a movie soundtrack. And it's my favorite soundtrack album, and a favorite album in general that nobody seems to know about. It's a movie called The Omega Man, and it's a 1971 science fiction, end of the world type of movie. You know, it was remade later with Will Smith, you know, under the original title, I Am Legend. And I just love it. I love the sound of this. It's Ron Grainer. You know, not that popular of a conductor, but I love the score on this. I love it. So this is my album for that. Okay, and the last question was, what's a favorite album of a genre that you don't really know very well? Okay, well, a genre that I don't know very well and I don't really like much would be jazz, really. I'm not a jazz fan. I can't stand the most jazz. In particular, I can't stand improv jazz. I'm not a big fan of Miles Davis. I'm not a big fan of, I'm not any fan of Miles Davis or Coltrane or anything like that. I've heard a lot of it because the young guy Corey at the record store where I hang out, he plays a lot of it. It's just not my cup of tea, as they say. However, I do like, and you know, some of you, that I wound up getting into, this is technically jazz, right? Big band type jazz, and this is, of course, Harry James, Wild About Harry. And this was the first album that I wound up listening to. I was in the record store one day and I just said, you know, I'm going to to surprise Corey one day, I'm going to pick out a jazz album just off the top of my head at random, a blind album, blind choice, and I'll put it on. And I wound up loving this album. So I'll go with Wild About Harry. Now, there's a lot of other albums that I have. Since then, I in the big band genre, really, which I'm still not that familiar with, I bought at least 100 records because they're so cheap. You can get them for $1 or under $1 sometimes, $5 for $1, whatever. And I've played a bunch of them. This one still stands out because it was the first one I heard. So I'm going to pick this one, although I have a lot more to listen to. Anyway, I think I kept it pretty much under 20 minutes. And it was a lot of fun doing this, although it takes a lot of preparation to get all your stuff together and everything and put it all back. But anyway, I hope other people will participate and do a video. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Take care.